Sexies, it's Money from TalkShabot, and you're watching No Good Fucking Television. So, what is an art style? What makes an art style unique? And how can you find yours? All of those are really good questions, and they will be answered today by yours truly. Okay, so first of all, what is an art style? Put simply, an art style is the unique way that an artist draws. Every artist's style is special and unique to their own art. Some people enjoy precise and detailed rendering, and others prefer to have a more loose, doodle-like quality to their art. I subscribe to none of these beliefs. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. I just draw, man. And I think once you get comfortable with yourself and your art, an art style will just kind of come naturally out of practice. I've never really had any distinct changes in my art style since I've gotten comfortable with art, more of just like an evolution on how I draw. The only real changes are how I practice art and the brushes and programs I use, but I feel like even in my old art, you can tell that these are pieces made by me, mostly anyways. But not everyone is yet at a level where an art style just comes naturally. I know I wasn't always like this. I had to grow into the way that I drew. And I'm sure that if you're watching this, you're probably at the stage in your art where you're not sure of the foundations that make up your art style just yet. You're just a little piece of clay when it comes to art. And don't worry, I'll mold you, come on. I think the base of basest things that you can start with when trying to find your art style are the inspirations and where you apply them. When it comes to my art, my main inspirations are Scott Pilgrim, the comics and the anime, Bruja Celta. That one's really super obvious if you know me from my Psyche K days, and if you do know me from my Psyche K days, I apologize. Powerpuff Girls Z, and that one Hamilton artist that made a shit ton of animatics back in the day. I now go by Aquarium, and even their current art style is like a huge inspiration for my rendering. So most of these, outside of Bruja Celta, when I was trying to be a clone of him, come pretty subconsciously when, like, drawing, ever since I've been drawing, and they're more or less apparent in my current art style, really just depending on how I'm feeling that day. I remember first getting into Scott Pilgrim and trying my damnedest to recreate the covers and panels as close as possible. You can decide how detrimental that has been to my art. I still draw side profiles like the comics. It's a bit of a problem. Anyways, so now you've got your influences. Now is when you decide on your default difficulty. And what's that mean? Basically, how detailed you want it to be. If you want to render, or if you want your stuff to be more lined and a little bit less detailed or more detailed. Also, just saying, I'm not saying one or the other is more difficult. It really just depends on who you are. However, usually on a scale though, pure lining would be considered less difficult and fully rendering would be considered more difficult, and how much detail you have and all that stuff. Honestly, you don't have to pick one to do, like, all the time. I know for me, some days lining a piece feels like way more work than simply rendering over a sketch. It just depends on who you are and how you prefer to do the work, or, you know, what look or vibe you're going for. You're never gonna hear me say something definitively about art styles, or at least you rarely will, because, like, the way you draw is just such a personal experience. So it's hard to really be objective. Everyone's different, but I'm doing my best, and I hope you find this helpful. And if you don't, just, I don't know, leave a comment with a blue heart telling me to die, I guess. Okay, so now you've got your inspo, and you've decided whether you want to render or line or whatever you want to do, and now you can get to actually stylizing. I think the main things that make an art style instantly recognizable are how you stylize anatomy and how you use colors. And those are like the two big things that I find are usually unique from artist to artist. Heavy on anatomy. You'll rarely find two artists who draw things the exact same way. Like, hands and eyes are like the big ones you notice. And now, if I were like a professional and not just a guy who somehow got his hands on a mic and a laptop, I tell you to go and, you know, learn the fundamentals before you go stylizing, and make sure you know how angles work and what color theory is and blah 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 blah. But to be honest, I don't want to say you shouldn't do all that. I'm just saying it's not all that necessary. Like, okay, you should study things that you have trouble with. I'm trying to get my stubborn ass in that practice nowadays, but, like, you don't gotta if you don't wanna. I won't force you. I don't get paid either way. So you want some quick tips on how to learn anatomy before you start stylizing? Go on Pinterest and just copy poses from there. That's how I'm doing it currently. You try to break stuff down and see how body parts interact with one another. Trace if you think it'll help you, understand better. You don't have to draw like full musculature or skeletal systems to understand things. You can just kind of eyeball it if you trust yourself that much. If you don't, I don't know, maybe take a course. You want to learn how to stylize anatomy? Well, you can just reference other artists and media, especially, the inspirations that you picked already. But be wary, I would not go around just copying others' drawings one for one, posting it, and then saying it's yours. Try to analyze how they stylize things, their use of lines and how they draw certain body parts and what they decide to include or omit. When it comes to anatomy, make sure that you're using it for knowledge and not just like copying one for one, because that will teach you nothing. And also be sure to respect the artist's wishes that you're setting, boundaries and all that. If it says don't heavily reference, maybe don't heavily reference, or at least just don't post it. I mean, they'll never know if you don't interact with them, I guess. That's a little bit shady. But anyways. Now on to coloring. I've talked about my old process of coloring back when this channel was just getting started. That video is bad though, don't watch it, I'll just tell you what I said here. The old way that I kept my colors consistent was color picking from pictures I like the vibe of and then making a color palette from that. And then I just use that as like a universal color palette and rarely venture outside of it. I still recommend doing that if you want to have like a unified look, if that's something that you go for. Like when put up next to each other, or just to stand out against other artists, it's a good way to have someone instantly recognize your art. I find though, the more that you draw, the more you'll find yourself being naturally drawn to specific colors. Like for instance, in a lot of my artwork, you'll see that I go for more of warm tones when it comes to coloring. Lots of off-whites leaning more towards yellow, This might be different for you though. Like maybe you want cooler tone colors, or maybe you just want a lot of colors. The tone of a color also has less to do with the color itself and just the way on the color wheel you take a certain color. Like, for instance, if I want warmer tone purple, I'd sway the color wheel more towards red, but if I want a cooler tone purple, then I'd go more towards blue. Red warm, blue cold, obviously, but like, that one's easy. If you want to get more specific, if you want a cool tone green, you'd go towards more cyan, and then if you want a warm tone green, you'd go more towards yellow. The surrounding colors on a piece also change how cool, warm, light, dark, or saturated your colors look. Context or something or the other. Like I said, I don't get paid for this. I'm not even qualified. I stopped taking art classes in like 6th grade. Another thing that really impacts how your art is perceived is shading. This is where the rendering part comes in most times. I just go for flat colors with like minimal cell shading in my art style because that's what I like, even when I am quote-unquote rendering. And you can also do that if that's what your art calls for. But if you want to do a bit more, there's lots of different ways to shade. There's pillow shading, which isn't the devil, as some people would have you believe. There's soft shading. There's also just using a purple multiply layer. That's cool. I mean, I wouldn't do it, but you can. And now that you know exactly the look that you want to go for, how you want everything to look, you can finally get to drawing. And then you notice there's a lot of brushes to choose from. Maybe even too many. For me though, and if you want to go for the look that I've been going for, I've been using this brush for about the past 5 years. Lots of people have been asking for my brush in the comments for a while, so here we go. It's a custom one that I made in Ibis Paint. I switched to Clip Studio Paint recently though, and at first I was just kind of using the flat marker brush because it's got roughly that same kind of feel, but I found this brush pack that I've been using, so yeah. You don't have to be curious or scroll through my Pinterest now. These are the brushes that I use. I use one brush for mostly everything, sketching, lining, rendering when it calls for it, because that's how I like to do it. It's just simplest for me. I recommend it too. It takes a lot of the brain work out of it, but you can use multiple brushes if you'd like. I allow myself to use multiple brushes for like accents as a treat. I don't know if any of you have seen, but there was a trend a while back called the brush theory, and it was like people drawing roughly the same thing with different brushes and how it impacted their art. So my main tip for trying to find a brush that you like is just see what you like the most, like just experiment. You can also do like I did and search your favorite artist's social media and look at what brushes they use. It takes a bit of guesswork out, now whether you like the feel of that brush, I can't say. I got lucky as hell, I will not lie. And now you can draw. Everything from here on out is your natural preference, or your natural process. Will you start with a sketch, or do you jump straight into line art? Or do you skip line art altogether and render over a sketch? It's all up to you, and that's the beauty of art. It's literally all up to the artist. Like I said at the beginning, the best way to find your art style is to just draw. Eventually you'll find out the parts of the process that you like or that you don't like, and you'll see how you prefer to draw certain things over time. Your art style will develop naturally, and that's the best way to figure it out. Just draw. It'll come to you at a certain point. Don't think about it. Just do it. Finally, I've got my hands on it. The perfect, most amazing, beautiful art style. It's all mine. The Blueberry Faygo art style. What the fuck?